Hi everyone, Oli here, and welcome to my review of the Sensorites. Pardon me. The seventh and penultimate story of the first season of classic Doctor Who, starring William Hartnell as the First Doctor. It's 6 parts long and is written by Peter R. Newman. The plot of the Sensorites is as follows. The Doctor and his companions land on a spaceship orbiting a distant and mysterious world, where a human crew lie frozen somewhere between life and death. The planet is the Sensphere, home of the Sensorites, beings of immense intelligence and power. Unable to leave, the Doctor and his companions must deduce the Sensorite intentions. Are they friendly, hostile, or frightened? And what is the deadly secret at the heart of the Sensphere? Okay, so a lot of people consider this story to be not a good story. But in my opinion, I thought it was a brilliant story. Yes, it does have its faults, but it's still a good story. I mean, in my opinion, this is probably the scariest story of season 1, if not one of the scariest stories in the Hartnell era. And I like scary things. The music was very good, and it captured the feeling of something horrible was about to happen. And this was just in the first episode alone. And the first episode actually stands out for me the most because it was very well done. It was very well done. It introduces some of the questions that the story raises very well. I mean, it is very mysterious, and I love the cliffhanger for episode 1 where Ian saw the Sensorite outside the spaceship and the music was playing. That was actually very good and very well written. Before the main action begins, the Doctor, Ian, Barbara, and Susan are in the TARDIS after their adventure in the 15th century Mexico. And it brings up the possibility of the TARDIS possibly landing on top of something or inside something. And there's something I've been forgetting to mention in my reviews, so all the stories in the first season, or pretty much the whole almost the entire Hartnell era, and maybe some of the Charlton era as well, it's serialized, so as one adventure ends, the other one begins. So, for example, the Daleks pretty much began at the very last minutes of The Unearthly Child. Edge of Destruction began at the very last minutes of the Daleks, and so forth. The Doctor was discussing how they've all changed, well, in the eyes of the viewers, how they've enjoyed good character development, and I liked all the references to the previous 6 stories, and I love these sorts of references because it gives an idea of what's happening, and at least they remember what's going on. So the Sensorites was very atmospheric and very creepy, and as I mentioned in my review of The Unearthly Child, 62 actually does this very well. With the black and white picture, it captures the whole atmospheric mood and rubber aliens and the men in suits. They actually can pull it off. I think that's the appeal that they give, and I think that's what's very appealing to classic Doctor Who. In episode 1, again, we see the TARDIS crew leave the TARDIS console room and enter Maitland's ship, and it was very impressive for the 1960s. I mean, you don't really, even if you see it in the new series, not a big deal, but to me I thought it was a very big deal because the 1960s, especially for TV productions, they weren't so big on special effects and stuff like that because of the budget. And I think it was very well done. The set design was okay, considering the fact that there were only 2 main sets, Maitland's ship and the Sensphere. It was just those 2 it was mainly set on, and I kind of wish it was set in more places, but to be honest, the plot of the story doesn't really need to have more location, anything of long days. The main cast, amazing as always. I liked William Hartnell's performance in the last episode. I also found it quite funny as well because he got pissed off at Ian's comment saying, "Oh, at least Maitland knows he was going," and the Doctor was like, "Implying I don't?" And it was so funny. I think Jacqueline here almost burst into laughter in that scene. And he decides to kick Ian out of the TARDIS, saying, "Wherever the ship lies next to you, I am taking you there. You're not coming back to this TARDIS anymore." And for some reason, in the following story, The Reign of Terror, it extended to Barbara as well, even though she didn't really do anything or say anything. But I'll address that when I get to the Reign of Terror review later on. The companion that stood out in this story for me was Susan. even though Barbara claimed at the start that she had changed. But this is where I think the Sensorites is where we see Susan develop a bit more. I think she's definitely growing out of the whole "oh grandfather" stage, even though she does pretty much do that in her entire even though she does kind of do that in her tenure at the TARDIS. But I think this is where she grew as a companion in this story. And we do get to because you find a little bit more about her. I think they were trying to imply that Susan has some sort of psychic or telepathic ability, even though it is confirmed later on in the series that Time Lords are telepathic. And I also like the part when Susan was talking to one of the elder Sensorites about Gallifrey, talking about the burnt orange skies and the silver leaves. Yeah, that was a very nice scene. And I remember the Sensorite was telling her, "My mind tells me that you have a feeling of you want to go home." And you remember in, what was it called again? What story again? In Gridlock, yeah. And the 10th Doctor was pretty much almost quoting what Susan was saying to Martha about Gallifrey. I thought that was very sweet as well. But don't forget, Susan is still a child. Even though she likes all these adventures and stuff, she does want to go home eventually. I mean, we all kind of want to do that. At some point, we just want to like take a step back and just go home or do something. The supporting cast was good, even though it was just mainly John and Carol and some of the Sensorites. John had become insane because of the Sensorites' mind control or something like that, but he does get better and he does kind of help the Doctor a bit. His actor did a good job as well. And I actually like the character of Maitland. He was a good captain, he was protective of what was left of his crew. It would have been nice to at least see him say goodbye to the Doctor and his companions after episode 6, because we don't really see him after the Doctor, Ian and Barbara. Sorry, the Doctor, Ian and Susan went to the Sensphere. So he just pretty much stays in the ship with Barbara. And it was almost as if the writer had actually forgotten about Maitland. Carol was good, well written also. There isn't really much I can say about her, other than the fact she was a good character. She does get captured by one of the evil Sensorites at the end, for episode 5, but there isn't really much I can say about this character, even though she's well written, but she doesn't really stand out compared to Maitland or John or anything. Now onto the Sensorites themselves. They were quite creepy and I liked how they were written. I mean, they were very mysterious, how they were weak and stuff like that. And then it was I liked how they were written. And it was also written as if what they were doing was bad, even though it was explained what they were doing wasn't that bad, but it's a part of them. But when we get to the Sensphere, we get to see some of the more ruthless Sensorites, such as, I think it was the City Planner Sensorite and the 4th Sensorite. That's what the TARDIS Wiki actually calls the Sensorite, or one of the evil Sensorites. Which was quite good, and I liked how they weren't trusting of the Doctor and his companions. When there was a moment where I think one of the elder Sensorites was killed by the 4th Sensorite, I think, and had accused the Doctor, and when the Sensorite came, he said, "This man killed the Sensorite," and he was pointing at the Doctor, and the elder Sensorite was like, "Oh, that's not possible because he was with me at this moment." And I actually like that scene. Okay, my criticisms of the Sensorites is the Sensorites themselves. Yes, I liked how they were written, I liked how the design was, but it was very hard to tell them apart. I mean, they all looked the same. Apart from the elder Sensorite, so they had this black sash, but I think there were 2 or more elder Sensorites, and it was very hard to distinguish between them, and that's something you don't really want to see. Yes, the Daleks are pretty much the same, but there are different Daleks. They have the Black Dalek, the Supreme Dalek, etc., etc. But at least give them a different costume or something like that, so we can at least know what they are instead of just assuming they're all the same, because I did have a bit of trouble trying to understand if the Sensorite was good or bad. And that's another sort of problem they sort of have in the Hartnett era. Except for the Ark, I think the Monoids, but they were numbered, so I'll get to that when I get to the review of the Ark. It's some in due course. So and there was a very iffy explanation on the human expedition in episode 6. I didn't really understand that, and I actually still don't understand it. I went to tell this Ricky after the episode, after I finished watching it, and I was still a bit confused. So it didn't really make any sense to me, to be honest. And finally, Barbara. I love Barbara. But for me, she doesn't really do much in this story. I mean, she just walks around the ship. She gets trapped with Susan with the insane John in episode 2, and then mid-episode 3, when the Doctor, Ian, and Susan decide to go to the Senssphere, for some reason she decides to stay on the ship with Maitland, and they don't really explain why she decided to stay on the ship. Yeah, I know the behind-the-scenes reasons because Jacqueline Hill went on holiday, but at least give a better explanation on why Barbara decided to stay on the ship. Or at least have Barbara go with the Doctor, Ian, and Susan, or at least have her fall ill to the poison instead of Ian, and so at least that would have given her opportunity to write her off, or introduce the human expedition, make them the enemies, and have them kidnap Barbara. But the thing is, that will just put Barbara back into damsel in distress territory, and I don't think that's a characterization I don't think that trait suits Barbara in this point in time. But my criticisms doesn't take away the fact that the Sensorites was a brilliant story. But because of these criticisms, it does fall short of becoming a perfect 10. So I'll be giving the Sensorites a 9 out of 10. My next review is The Reign of Terror, the 8th and final story of Season 1 of Classic Doctor Who, and is the first Doctor Who season finale, hooray! And is the third pure historical, and the second story to have missing episodes. But compared to Marco Polo, The Reign of Terror is actually okay because there are only 2 episodes missing from that and the rest exist. And that's episodes 4 and 5. So be on the lookout for the Reign of Terror review. Thank you for watching for this review of the Sensorites. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. If you like this review, give me a like and give me some feedback on what I could do better. And of course, tell me what you thought of the Sensorites. So have a nice day. See you around, folks.